Hello and welcome back to Automotive Tales. As you can see, we are back in the Land Rover. So on this episode, I'm going to start to rectify some of the shortcomings of this Land Rover. One of those is the lack of information. So I have a fuel gauge, I have a fuel warning light. What I don't have is anything that tells me whether the engine is up to temperature or indeed overheating, and what the alternator system is doing, which are really kind of the two main systems. You need to make sure the engine's still running, you've got petrol and you've got electricity. So I'm going to start to add some gauges. I have already acquired a temperature gauge, which is now sitting in the dashboard. And a good friend of mine has sent me some other little gauges that might be useful. So thank you, Alex, for sending these through. One is a Smith's oil gauge. I don't know where I can get an oil feed from to get the oil pressure for this. So I'm probably not going to fit the oil pressure gauge. He has also sent a lovely little Smith's ammeter, which I may well fit, although I'm a little bit concerned that for this to work, I've got to get all of the feed from the alternator behind the dashboard, connected across here, and then back under the engine bay, which just seems like a recipe for disaster. I don't like moving power cables of that magnitude around a car if I can avoid it. So I have also ordered a voltage gauge, which hasn't arrived yet, because that's just simply a case of finding an ignition live and an earth, so we can see what the alternator is doing, whether we've got 12 volts or 14.4 volts. So first things first then is to try and get this temperature gauge wired up. While we're here, Alex also sent me this, which isn't really much use for a Land Rover and gives me very Madonna vibes, but is a cool thing that's going to go on the shelf at the workshop. So this is actually a dial for an early 924, and it had two dial sets that had these sort of cool shapes to them. This one's got a temperature gauge, fuel gauge, and a couple of different warning things inside it. But yeah, it's really random and quite cool. Thanks, Alex. So here you can see I am missing one of the gauges from the pods. This is a temperature gauge that I acquired a short while ago. It's currently not wired up. And the one working gauge, which is the fuel gauge. There is also a gaping hole in the dashboard where I presume it had some sort of clock. I have no idea what's actually meant to go here, but that's about the right size for a standard 52mm gauge. So it's likely that I might be able to put, well, the other one, actually, not this oil pressure gauge, but maybe the ammeter will fit in there, which might be quite nice. Or I'll just get a little analog clock. So the temperature gauge is fed by this little sender down here, right on the front of the engine. So I found a wire flopping around close to it, which had a very, very dodgy looking spade terminal on. So I put a new spade terminal on. And you notice I've got a little test wire in here. So my next job is to try and trace this green and blue wire, which disappears into this wiring loom. And I don't know quite where it goes from there. So I'm going to have a stalk around at the bulkhead here, see if I can find a continuity link for that, and then again behind the dashboard. So it took me way longer than I care to admit to find the other end of this, but it turns out it doesn't go that way off down the wiring loom. It comes up here to a dead connector. So this connector here doesn't appear to have the other half of it anywhere. Bearing in mind, this is a bit of a Frankenstein. So you've got, this is all Range Rover. It was originally fuel injection when I bought it. We've gone back to carburetors. So some of the wiring is for the ECU and fuel injection system that would have been on the Range Rover. Some of it is original to the Land Rover. So who knows what's what, but there definitely isn't the other half to go with this. So this is the signal wire for the temperature gauge. This is for the oil pressure switch, which is quite important. So I'm going to try and run that through as well. And these remaining three are for the alternator. So I've got to work out which one is which. One will be a charge light. The other, I suspect, is just a voltage signal. Not entirely sure which is which. But the most important things right now is the temperature sender and the oil pressure switch. So I'm going to make up a little loom. You can see I've sort of started here. I'm going to run these all the way around the bulkhead into the dashboard and see if we can get the right things to illuminate on the dashboard. Right, let's see if this works. So ignition on. Oh, we've got movement. Very rapid movement. The car's been sat for a while, so that's clearly not right. Okay, well, the car is very much not overheating, so I think we have a problem. So a quick test under here, and if I short that terminal straight to the block, I get the same effect with the dial going right the way over hard right. So I suspect the resistance in this particular sender is wrong. Now, this being a Frankenstein with a Range Rover engine and a Defender chassis, who knows what's the right thing? Now, I was under the impression the 200 TDI and the V8 share the same temperature sender, but maybe not. There's a couple of different options, so I'm going to have to order a few options, see if we can find one that's got the right resistance pattern for that gauge, which is slightly annoying. So with that, new parts ordered, and I'm going to have to sit and wait. In the meantime, I've pushed the little ammeter into the dashboard because it fills a hole. Looks quite nice. And as we're struggling with getting a decent speedo reading, I have found you can get a 52mm GPS speedo. So it might well be that once I get this working, I might put a little GPS speedo in here and put my voltmeter down here, because I've had the panel off at the back and I found some wiring that will allow me to put the voltmeter in here. So that might end up with quite a neat little set of panels. Then all I've got to do is figure out how to make any of this work, because at the moment the only thing that works is the parking brake light comes on when I turn the ignition on, but not when I pull the handbrake on. So that's fun. Right, let's see if we can do the, the time machine thing. Ooh, look, we have new dials. Okay, so things have changed a little on the dashboard. You can see that we now have a temperature gauge over on the right. It's fitted a little bit squiff because I'm an idiot. But the reason for that is because we've now got our GPS speedo, which is actually driven by this little GPS pickup unit up here. That gives me speed, instant speed, and an odometer readout, so it's clocking the mileage, which is great because this still isn't connected to a cable because I haven't found the right adapter to get that to work. And even if I do, I don't know if it's going to read the right speed and mileage. So we're going to rely on this for now. I've also discovered that the fuel warning light, which is just here, is the other thing that does work on this dial binnacle, as I found out to my detriment when I thought I still had a quarter of a tank of fuel and it started flashing away the other day while I was driving to work. So not sure I entirely trust this, even if it does work. Now, I haven't got my new temperature. Well, I have got my new temperature sender, but it's been snowing, so I can't really bother to fit that today. So at the moment, the temperature gauge will go straight off to the right as soon as the engine has any temperature in it. But as you will now see, we have a little GPS speedo, which is quite cool. Although you can only really see the camera and my face because of the sunlight, which is odd considering it's going to be -6 tonight, and yet it's nice blue skies. So final piece of the puzzle is going to be swapping out this sort of dummy meter that's pushed in here. I actually attached this in because I had to use the Land Rover to go to work this week, as it was the only car I had that was working, and I'll insert a little video that explains why. So, if you hadn't guessed, because the audio is a bit rubbish on the dash cam, the passenger side window on the Volvo exploded at random while she was driving along the A6. Who knows why? Apparently these things do happen relatively often. I've never seen it before, but it's apparently not uncommon. So, next job then is going to be to obviously remove this and replace it with this. We have a little voltmeter. So I've been waiting to get a second-hand one. I know it looks a little bit scruffy, but I didn't want anything that was too shiny and new. So I've got a nice second-hand Smith's one, which has got a black bezel rather than a chrome bezel. And that is going to go in here because there is some wiring under this little box that's back here. So I can pick up a 12-volt feed so we can see what's going on with the alternator and see whether it's sitting at 14.4 as it should be. And then that's it. I'm done for dials. I'll actually have information on what's going on while I'm driving the car. And then I can get on to, well, what other things we're going to do with it. fixing things that don't work, like the fact the fans don't work, and the wipers work but only on full speed. There's no intermittent wiper, so I've got to try and work that out. And actually start driving it some more, which would be nice. Right, dial is wired in. Let's see. Sort of working. Oh, there we go. It's moving. It's moving quite a lot. This seems to be a running theme. Why is this reading 14 volts when it's clearly running at 12? I've just checked it with the multimeter. Now it's nearly 15. Oh, for God's sake. So we're back a few days later. I've checked the wiring on this a few times, and I've checked turning it on and off again. In fact, you can see it's just very slowly still moving after I've just had it on. And there's something not quite right. It's not quite calibrated just so. I might take it apart and see if I can figure out what's going on, but I just need accurate data for now. So I've had to give up and go with a modern, cheap and cheerful little one. So this is like, you know, a 10 quid unit. Hopefully this will give me an accurate reading. However, annoyingly, this has got ring terminals, not spade terminals. So I'm going to have to change the wiring again. I might do a little adapter for this so that if I come back to putting this back in future, I can swap it back over, but that's slightly annoying. Right, let's see if I can get an actual voltmeter working on this car. And then maybe I'll have a full set of dials. That'd be nice. Okay, there we go. Boring and not quite as pretty as the Smith style, but bang, nice reliable 12 volts. Thank you very much. And we've made one other additional change to the Land Rover. So we got rid of this middle seat, which actually wasn't attached to anything at all, because all of this transmission tunnel has been messed around with to put this auto gearbox and stuff in. And so a lovely gentleman called Mark Hubbard gave me this for free. It appears it's done the rounds at Loughborough Land Rover Club, because I think it started with a gentleman called Andy Cox as well. But yeah, I now have a little box for storing mainly various tools and, you know, bits that fall off, like the brake pedal cover and some other dials that I'm not actually going to use that I don't know where to put yet. So yeah, we now have some actual storage. I don't have a key for it, so I can't lock it, but that doesn't matter because it's not actually attached to anything yet. But it sits there quite nicely, and I have storage. Result. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. So, I have been carrying out an experiment to try and work out which one of the different sensors fits my Frankenstein of a Defender.